Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Sam, and with me today we have my M2, and I'm going to do a little run round of the car and my thoughts on modifying the suspension. And I have changed the suspension on my car a little bit, give you some pros, some cons, things you may want to think about if you're something you're going to do. So let's have a look around the car. Now for the eagle-eyed people out there, you'll be able to see my car is slightly lowered. Now this was not actually the major intent of changing the suspension, but it was quite a nice byproduct. So my car is a little bit lower, could probably be spaced a little bit, but it looks quite good. Hello, welcome to the inside of the M2, and I thought I would give you a bit of a run through of my experience of modifying the suspension on this car. I'll run through just some different options that are available, maybe a thought processes you might go through, thought process I went through, and some of those things to get you a bit of an understanding. I would say this video is not for a real suspension nerd, so it's more for someone who's maybe fitting their first modified suspension to, or first set of suspension to their car. I'll start off by running through the sort of handling characteristics and the suspension setup on the stock M2, and then run through changes, etc, etc. So I use this car day to day in central London with the odd road trip and the odd trip around the country, motorways, whatever, a couple of track days every now and then, that sort of thing. So most of my usage is quite low speed and it's driving around London. And one of the things about the M2 stock that I didn't like, if we run through the suspension, is low speed. It's quite jiggly. You're going down a road sub 40 miles an hour, whether it's in town at 5 miles an hour or a country road, and it's just like this quite a lot. The faster you go, it does start to smooth it off a bit better, but it's not super well controlled, and it just doesn't work that well at slow speeds. And for me, that is where I spend most of the time with this car, so it's something I looked at changing. If you're on track or on the motorway, but yeah, on track, the actual stock setup is really good with normal set of tyres. If you've got a fresh set of tyres, there's no understeer, it's got a good amount of grip at the front, good amount of grip at the back. You can drive it however you like, really. You can slide it a bit, you can drive really accurately. It's actually really quite a rewarding car to drive on track. Other than maybe the seatbelt, seats, that sort of thing. I changed the brake pads, lines and the fluids early on in my ownership of this car, and that, if you're going to do any track use, I would say in pretty much any BMW, you should do that straight away. The suspension on track is pretty good. The only thing that happens is as you go faster and push it a bit more, etc, etc, the front ends, front tyres start to wear, and then you start to get understeer, and it would be nice probably to be able to adjust that a little bit to bring back some more grip to the front. But fresh set tyres, it's amazing on track. It's just, you start to, its default is understeer, but like that's what happens with a lot of cars when the front tyres go. But so coming back to my usage, and therefore really what your aims are going to be modifying the suspension on your car. So my main aim was comfort. I wanted the ride to be better at lower speeds, and just generally all around a bit. I wanted the car to be a little bit comfier and a little bit less jiggly and harsh and stuff like that. And so that's probably one aim. I don't think a lot of people look for that. Maybe slightly older people look for that. Younger people generally, they want it to be stiffer, sort of sportier. Maybe you know, you might just want to change the aesthetics of the car. You think it might look better lower. My car is 10-15 mil lower than stock, and it looks great. It's so it looks much better. I think there's a certain setup of suspension and tyre and whatever that just looks right, and stock it's a little bit high, but you know, that's one of the things. Or I'd say your third thing might be if you use the car on track a lot. Now, if you're heavy into this already, you know this answer, but you might want your, like I was saying with the front going, once the grip starts to go in parts of the car, whether it's the front or the back, you might find that you want to soften the front up to give a bit more grip to the front, or stiffen up the rear or something like that, to compensate for the fact that the grip levels are changing throughout the day. And with an adjustable setup you can do that, and it actually means you can probably push more throughout a day rather than just when you're on a fresh set, or you might be able to work with a not so fresh set of tyres and get a bit more of a fun drive out of it rather than just understeering everywhere. So that's probably the 3 different ways. And then I thought I'd run through the options available. So the car at the moment, or not at the moment, but stock car has a fixed damper spring setup. So everything's set, you can't adjust it. On the M3 you can, it's electronically adjustable, so you can have it stiffer or softer, but on the M2 it's a fixed setup. Now, you could get a different fixed setup, so slightly different rates and stuff like that. I think that's probably not the best of options, because it's pretty good standard, and you're only going to be able, if it's not right, it's not right when you change it. But that's an option. Then you can get sort of like a semi-adjustable. So my one is you can adjust the damping, and it's like I've got the Bilstein B16 setup. I think it's like the PS 110. It's the setup for the M2, and it has the option of going between 1 and 10 on the front and the back, and you spin this little dial. You sort of reach behind the front wheel. I've got it here. I'm stationary, so I can probably dig it out for you. Bought this little guy the other day from Amazon. I think it was like £6, something like that. A little mirror with an LED light on it, and it's telescopic. So that is just actually helpful for, you can wang it behind the wheel, see what the setup's, what you're twizzling, and that makes it a lot easier because you can't really get your head in the gap behind a wheel. So if you don't know which way it's going, that is quite a good little tool to have if you're adjusting your suspension. So my setup is a little bit adjustable, and then you can go full everything, like a 3-way kind of setup where you can adjust compression, rebound, high speed, low speed, ride height. So mine's ride height and rebound and damping. And with the full setup is you can customize everything, but then it is endlessly customizable, and I think you're probably going to play with that until the rest of the time, unless you take it to someone who's already set up a car very well. They set up your car and then your job done. But my takeaway from doing this is I went for this option. It seemed like a pretty good option at the time. I got a second-hand set of these Bill 16s from someone who'd had them for a couple of months, put them on the car, and then I realised within a couple of days that being infinitely adjustable is not, it's not quite right for me, because immediately you then want to adjust it all the time. So I got the car and put it into 1, so like the softest setting. I don't drive around on 1 anyone really, but I wanted to try it out, so I was like, okay. And then I drove it for a couple of days in central London. It was great. I was going like 5 miles an hour and just kind of wafting around, and it was noticeably better in that regard than the stock setup. But then I went on a motorway, and then I remember I was near Silverstone driving around the roads around there trying to go for our accommodation. We were there for a race weekend, and the car was awful on these country roads, like absolutely awful, all over the place. The weight, balance, everything was just. So I immediately, when I got back, realised, okay, I need to stiffen it up again. And this is where I ran into the problem, because the stock setup was pretty good most of the time, just not great low speed. And then I've suddenly come across a situation where, okay, it was great low speed, but it wasn't good the rest of the time. So I've sort of been just trying to find out where that middle ground is with this setup to get it to the point where I feel like it's right. And I've leveled out at like 4.4 front and back, and it's definitely a bit softer than stock. The damping, just the way it deals with bumps, is a lot better, but it's not night and day difference. And I'm a bit up, neither here nor there about it. It's definitely better, but I wish you could just flick your fingers and flick back to stock to see what it's like. But this is sort of where I'm at. And then I'd like to talk about, you know, some of the other things to consider. So I've potentially why I wouldn't necessarily do this again. Now, I've had this set up on the car for 3, 4, 5 months, something like that. And you need to think about how long you're going to have the car for, and then also how much the money means to you. If it doesn't mean anything and the time doesn't matter, then I would just do it. But I think most people care, don't want to waste money. So when I'm buying a car, I generally want to buy it for the least amount of money possible and sell it for the most amount of money possible when I'm finished with it. But if you look at the overall costs of doing the suspension on this car, so one, you have the suspension, the cost of buying the suspension, but once you've done that, you then have to have it fitted. So I think that was a couple £100, something like that, to have it fitted. Then you've got to have a geo and a setup done, so you can make sure that all the wheels are pointing in the right direction, all that sort of stuff. And then when you come to sell the car down the line, you've got to take the suspension off and have another geo done before you sell it. Or you don't have to, but it's a nice thing to do. So it's actually a lot of extra costs involved that you may not think about when you go, oh, okay, I can get the kit for £1,500 or £500 or whatever, is you've got to install it. So if you're installing it yourself, fine. But if you're paying for someone else to do it, just be wary, get a price from someone, and factor in that you've got to take it off again when you've finished it. And that's sort of why I'm not sure about this on this car, because for me and my usage, it's better, but it's not the night and day. I think you can get an electronic damped adjustable version of the same setup. It's more money, and I think that would probably, I would love like 3 setups. One would be like cruiser town S-Class mode type thing, and then one would be motorways and fast countryside, just countryside driving, and the third one would be track. And then when I'm on track, I would want to be able to tweak the balance of the car a little bit to make better use of tyres and things like that. So you end up, I would want 3 different setups. At the moment, it's not very difficult to change between them. So in theory, I could, if I knew I was in London for a week, it takes 5 minutes or something to swap it back. But I just don't really want to be changing the setup of the car all of the time. So that's just something to think about. If you're wondering how your car's going to handle being a bit lower or that sort of thing, then what you could actually do is go on something like Forza or Gran Turismo Sport, any of those games, and take a car, M3 or Porsche or whatever, and just play with the setup in the game. So lower the ride height, stiffen the springs a bit, and see how that feels, and that will give you quite a good feeling of how the handling of the car might change. Obviously you're not actually, driving it in real life, but it's a good way of getting an idea of just playing with suspension setups and stuff like that. I wouldn't stop anyone from doing it, but I just think you should think about it, and think about it in the ownership terms of the car. If you're going to keep the car forever, definitely solving if the suspension is a real problem for you, look at those things. It's long term, it's not massively expensive to change, but you might just want to lower it a little bit, talk to people that have done it, all those sorts of things really. I'm sort of coming to the end of my ownership time with this car. It's just because my usage has changed really. It's been a really great car, I love it. I think it is my favourite BMW at the moment, but it's not quite the right car for me anymore. It's been great, but I'm doing more longer trips, so I want something that's a bit comfier. Maybe things like adaptive cruise control. I don't know. It's quite nice. That sort of thing. But I just want something that's a bit comfier and a bit bigger, because I often find with the coupe style loading boot, it's quite difficult. It's not the easiest thing to chuck stuff in, and then I often have the seats down and the car quite full whenever I'm going somewhere, and it'd be nicer to it not be quite so difficult to take so much stuff. So I'm probably going to get a bigger car. I don't know what it's going to be yet. I don't know whether it'll be a BMW. I think it will potentially be a Mercedes. I've always had a strong liking for the sound of the Mercedes engine. It's like a 63 engine or something like that, but I haven't decided. I could go completely one way, could go completely the other. But bringing it back to modifying suspension, I hope I've given you some stuff to think about if it's something you're thinking of doing. Existing owners, people that have modified their cars, let me know in the comments how it's gone, whether you've liked it. I've been trying to get to do a video with Joe Achilles, and because he's modified the suspension on his M2 competition, but he's gone the other way. He went stiffer. So I think that'll be really interesting, and it'd be really interesting to drive both cars if we can do it before this one goes. It's not going quite yet. Somewhere where we can push them and see how the dynamics of the cars differ, and whether one's better or not. I think it shows how people are different, really. You want different things. For me, it's more of a daily car, and I want it to be a bit more comfy for my usage. But that's that. If you've enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. I'm doing all sorts of stuff at the moment, and you'll see more BMW videos, more Porsches sliding around, more podcasts. I'm trying to work on getting a few more people on the podcast. It's proving tricky trying to get schedules together, but hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next video. Thanks very much.